The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lyons, how's it going?
It's going video games. This is I'm at the summer. We're recording this right at the start of summer, right? And like you don't talk about your work too much, but like I work in ed tech, and like there's a very real like cycle, right? And so you would think like, summer, all the teachers are off, so that's time to relax. Wrong. That is when everyone throws all of their annual events because it's the time classes aren't in session.
There you go.
So as of the moment we're recording, there was like the last few weeks were the calm before the storm, where it's like my next several months are just absolutely packed. But I actually had like a little break, right?
Nice.
Like spring, summer, or like spring projects were ending. Summer projects hadn't quite started. So it was like, this is good. It's about to be terrible, but this is good. This is nice.
There you go. Right. You know, it's nice to have that kind of breather. Yeah, no, for me, one of the nice things is, like I am an administrator, but I used to be a scientist. And so I work for a lab, and we get audited on a biannual basis. And we completed our audit, and I was a little bit nervous because, I'd gone in and made a whole bunch of efficiency changes and all sorts of stuff. And then the big question is like, well, did you sacrifice quality for any of that? Right. So the auditor came in and gave us fewer findings than have ever been received by the organization. So I was like, all right, so I'm going to keep this up, You
should, first you need a t-shirt or a mug, right? Like a world's greatest dad mug, but like,
yep.
Like organization's fewest findings mug.
Well, it was funny because there was one part where one time we were trying to get a certification, and there were different sections that needed certification. So it took them 13 years to get certification for the first section. And then I was like, hey, we're going to get certification for this next section. They're like, how long is it going to take you? I was like, 6 months. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, it took 13 years the last time, so we'll believe it when we see it. And then we got it in 6 months. And so I just went to my boss and I said, so just whatever you're paying the last guy, just pay me 26 times more than them because that's how much more effective I am, right? I mean, that makes sense. And for whatever reason, they shot that idea down. But I think the math holds.
I mean, I would say if you got things done, even if they rounded it up and said, well, we're going to round to whole years, it'd be like, fine, okay, just 13 times. Like, that's fine.
Yeah,
we don't go to a lower level of precision than years.
Yep, exactly. You know what? And just even if you wanted to do rounding error again and just say 10, I'll take an even order of magnitude more,
Yeah. That's
because I'm generous.
You are both considerate and respectable, and I don't know how any accounting person could argue with this.
I know, right? I really feel like I've given up a lot of territory here.
Yeah.
But
people are,
yes,
they're not reasonable. If you are into talk about how George is going to get 10x his salary, you can like, subscribe, listen, review, all of the internet things. There's links for all of this crap in the show notes. If you do actually leave ratings and reviews, they're helpful, but actually like recommending an episode of the show is the best. Go talk to people, tell them that they should listen to this. If you want to follow us on the internet, there are places to do some of those things, but there's also the Patreon, and Patreon is where you can get the after show. Everybody gets the after show no matter what level they support us at. But if you support at a high enough level, we will actually shout you out on the show. And George, when we were getting ready to record this morning, because we're recording at an unusual time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had like a 90-minute window before we were going to record, which I don't usually have. And do you know what I did with that time?
Did you look up the names of our patrons?
I did. They're right here in front of me.
Oh my God. That's such a journey for you. You know,
like I know, like
I love this journey for you.
I feel like I have turned a corner after, it's 2024, 11 years of podcasting. I prepared for an episode.
Good job.
Right.
I mean, I still haven't. So I'm glad that you're doing this whole bit because it's giving me more time to figure out what the 1,000 tier level is. So
the amount of times you have fumpered for me, when I look back on the beach and I saw only one set of footprints, it's because you were fumpering for me. So now I'm returning the bumper favor.
Bumper favor.
Which would also make a good mug or t-shirt.
Hell yeah.
if you support us at one of those high enough levels, we will shout you out on the show. So we first need to thank our 4-bit portables, Martin, Joshua, Keith, and Brad, our 8-bit classics, Jay Brent, Kevin, John, and Yarno, and our 16-bit hero, Michael.
And for $1,000, we will design a cup that says Fumfer Favor on it, and then give you the rights to it so you could go sell it. So that's really more of an investment, really.
That is a legitimate investment that I can almost imagine us coming to regret, but I'll take that chance. I'll take that chance.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like, so really, if, like, you're talking to your significant other and they're wondering why you're about to drop a cool grand on, like, a podcast, right? Just say, like, no. This is a good investment. It's an investment opportunity.
No, see, we'll get 2 mugs and then they'll get 2 mugs. Yeah. So we have a mailbag question here, and this one, I knew right away what my answer was for this. I'm kind of interested to hear what you have to say. But for me, the second I was reading this, I was like, oh, I already know what I'm going to say. So the question is, what is a game you've played because you felt like you were supposed to as a gamer, right? Like, you call yourself a gamer. I'm a person who plays video games. What is a game that you played because you felt like an obligation to play it? Or at least that's how I interpret this question. Yep. And for me, it's Halo. I played Halo because I felt like I was supposed to play Halo. I didn't have an Xbox when they were new. I still don't have an Xbox, but most of those games have now come to PC, and I do have a gaming PC. And so a few years ago, I was like, I'm going to play Halo because it felt a little weird to not only have missed like such a large part of gaming pop culture, but also to still like know a lot about it. Like, I have a video game album that's the London Philharmonic playing a bunch of classic music. And the second the Halo theme comes on, like, I recognize that music as super iconic piece of music, right? The stupid Spartan like power armor that they wear, the Cortana crap. Like, I know a fair amount about at least the early parts of the pop culture that came out of it. And I was like, I'm okay at shooters. Like, I bet I can make it through this game. And I played it and I actually really enjoyed it. Like, it is a really well-made game. It deserves a lot of the accolades it received, but I know for a fact that I played that game only because there was like the specter of, you're not a real gamer, you haven't played Halo, which is like dumb. I should be too old and hopefully mature for that, but I don't know. It kind of worked out since I enjoyed it, but I don't love that that's the reason that I played it.
Yes. Yeah. No, and I didn't even know that you had played Halo. I still have not. And to your point, right, is definitely one where you're like, I need to play this, right? Like, this is a thing that, a lot of people enjoy. And, it's interesting because the reason why I never got into it, because at the time I did not play first person shooters. So I was like, no, first person shooters are not for me. Now I play tons of first person shooters, but somehow Halo is still not for me. Like, that's how terrible the human brain is. It's like, I've already put that in a box and put it in a special place in my brain. And even though the house has completely changed, it is still in that box, in that place, which is interesting. I didn't know that about myself until I was just saying it out loud. You know the first first person shooter I ever played?
Are you not counting Doom?
I'm not counting Doom.
Okay,
no,
so
I'm counting like a shooter
like a modern like twin stick. I'm gonna say Portal. No, Borderlands.
Nope. Fallout 3.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a solid first entry. Like, you could do a lot worse.
I know, right? It's a solid first entry, and it was what I needed to get into it because it had the VATS system, which was more role-play. Yeah.
I am now realizing that is also what made that game attractive to me. Was because I was like, I am terrible at first-person shooters because I played Doom, but I'm not any good at it, right? And I missed GoldenEye because I didn't have an N64, right? Like, so, and it's not twin stick, right? It's single stick.
Right.
So the first twin stick shooter I played was probably Fallout 3, and then soon on the back of that was probably Portal.
Right. Yeah, because they were similar in time release. But yeah, no, I remember it distinctly because one, dual analog stick, like the whole thing was foreign to me. But I was like, they were like, hey, what do you want to use to fire the gun? Because like they had everything set up the way you normally would with like the trigger button firing. And I was like, no, I don't need the trigger buttons. I'm going to use square because square is execute, right? And after playing for about 20 minutes, I'm like, this is impossible because I had to like line up my shot and then remove my finger from one of the sticks to like hit shoot. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like, this is such poor design. And I was like, oh, right. But if it was a trigger, it might all work a little bit more
I did this to me.
So, yeah. But anyways, for me, I'd say game that I played because I was supposed to. There's one I'm trying to remember the name of. So if you can look that up while I talk about this other thing. There's an Overwatch. Overwatch came out at the same time as another game of the same like type, and it was made by the same people who made Borderlands. Like I think it's Gearbox or 2K. And I can't remember the name of that, but it's like Blood Rain or something, I think.
Is that the vampire themed one that was like terrible?
Battleborn. That was the name of it.
Battleborn. Yes.
Yeah, I knew it had a B name to it, and so that was one that I played because I had to, because Overwatch came out and the Borderlands version of Overwatch came out, and I'm like, I'm gonna play the Borderlands one because Borderlands is awesome, and screw Overwatch for trying to steal their whatever, and tribalism till the day I die. And Battleborn was just such a blatantly inferior game that that I quickly jumped shipped to Overwatch because it was just worse in every possible way. So that was that. But then the one that I would say I probably played because of guilt was Final Fantasy X or anything in the Final Fantasy series.
Yeah. Although I probably did guilt you into Final Fantasy Tactics, but you did enjoy Final Fantasy Tactics.
I did. And I did enjoy Final Fantasy X, but it was definitely one that I played that like I wasn't like, oh my God, I have to go seek this out. Like it was like you were like, hey, you should play Final Fantasy. And I was like, yeah, there's a ton of Final Fantasy out there. And I played none of it, so yeah, sure, and then, yeah, and I actually did enjoy that game. And it gave us the great story of poor Titus, who was stuck in his hellish loop of being killed and then resurrected by Yuna and killed again. Yeah. And that's a good story.
He was the true hero of that battle, though, because all of that monster's rage was directed just at keeping Titus on the ground. And so your wimpy, casters were able to stay on their feet and deal damage because Titus was like, aha, I'm here to protect you. Bleh.
Yeah. And I just like imagine it's just like, let me stay dead. This is worse than hell. So yeah. And I wonder too, like if Titus was a bad person, right? And then so he dies, goes to hell, and then is resurrected and brought back, right? And then allows himself to be killed again, so that way, like the group can continue to survive. Would you slowly earn your way into heaven that way? Right? Like,
yeah, if it's been a while since I fell out of the Catholic faith, like I was part of as a child, but I'm pretty sure that that's how purgatory works. You are forced by some wizard to complete righteous acts, and then eventually you get out of purgatory. In fact, this actually is not even as absurd as I was thinking when I first started saying it, because depending on how literally you take certain writings and how you like sort of personify purgatory, somebody goes into purgatory and then they're like prayed out by like people saying like, no, they were good people. Like I'm praying for them to like go out of purgatory into heaven. And that's not like the most common reading, but purgatory kind of fell out of favor as like a religious thing. So it's sort of like vague in my mind. But that's kind of what was happening, right? Like Titus died and went to hell because of his, I don't know, he was a bad person. He stole candy from babies. And then Yuna believes in him so much that she was like, no, really, he's a good person. Let him prove it. and then he did.
And he did. And so now he's got a place in heaven. Actually, I'm playing a D&D campaign where one of the characters is a Harengon. And he is always asking me like, so people will enter a room and then I'll be like, oh, there's this person. They look like this. And they'll go like, what does he smell like? And every time. And we've been doing it for like 6 months now. And I still don't prepare for that, like what people smell like. Right. So I'm always on the spot trying to make it up. And so they were talking to a Solar, an angel. Right. And he goes, what does he smell like? And I was like, you know what? He smells like really, really good pie. And the guy was like, why pie? And I was like, oh, what? Because of the sky pie. Why? Did you think he smells like sky cake? No, there is only sky pie in my universe. When you die, you get sky pie. And if you believe in sky cake, I swear to God, I will kill you, And then just like went into this like 5-minute rant about the evils of sky cake and the virtues of sky pie. And I was happy with that. So,
yeah, which is not any dumber than any real religion.
Right. I mean, where it's just like, I believe this, I believe that. It's like, oh, well, let's agree to disagree. Or we could kill each other. Hey, I'm just saying, all options on the table. We're in a green zone, brainstorming.
Yeah,
no bad ideas.
You make a compelling case for bloodshed.
Like, there was a guy a while ago who said, hey, let's all be groovy to each other. And I took that as, and kill anyone who's not. And it's like, no.
No. That's not. What do you think groovy is?
Oh, God, it really changes all the stuff that Shaggy said in Scooby-Doo. What are you reviewing and why should I care?
So I, for this mini review, played The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap, which...
That's a 4-player game, right?
No, that is 4 Swords.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Which
I remember.
Because that was also a Game Boy Advance game, it is reasonable that those would like get lumped together in your mind. But then you hear the title and you're like, right, it says it right on the box.
Yeah, it says, yeah. I remember for 4 Swords being like, this is going to be the best thing ever because I love Zelda so much and now I can share it with my friends and like we can all play together. And man, it is wild how like when you both think you have a solution to the puzzle and like friendships, I think it ended friendships faster than All-Stars or whatever, the Mario Party,
Yeah.
Like, because it'd be like, no, go stand on that thing. No. You need to do this first. No, I know I'm doing that. Okay. But you need to stand over there. And I'm like, this is really not fun. Sorry, but continue. Minish Cap.
No, although you are making me reconsider ever doing a review for that one in the future because it does not sound like any fun. Let's see, stats for Minish Cap. So it came out in November of 2004. So I'm not quite to 20 years, but I don't care. It's a mini review. And that was in Japan. It actually didn't come out until January of 2005 in North America. But again, I don't care. I make the rules.
Yep.
This was a Game Boy Advance game, and it's 2D Zelda, right? So top-down action, block pushing, puzzle solver, as you just said, right? It's like go stand on that button while the thing happens. What I didn't remember about this game until I started playing it, and then I went and looked up like where it was in release history, is the Game Boy Advance in terms of like hardware sophistication is about as powerful as the Super Nintendo. In some ways it's a little bit more powerful, in some ways it's pretty comparable, but it is kind of like, oh, I have a Super Nintendo in my pocket, right? So that was like its main claim to fame. And that's pretty damn cool when you think about it. But this game came out after Wind Waker. So when you think about like what design sophistication did they have in terms of like Zelda as a franchise, this isn't like, oh wow, it's like about the same as like a Nintendo or like Link to the Past. It's like, no, they have like another decade and a half of Zelda, right, knowledge on like how to build games, right? This is after the Game Boy Color games, Link's Awakening, which was good. This was after Story of Seasons. This is after Ocarina and Majora's Mask, right? Like this is a contemporary of Wind Waker, which is bananas. So you're going into something that looks very much like Link to the Past, but has all of the, literally, I think 14 additional years of design sophistication. So my memory of this game is I played it for like a minute and then I stopped, but I don't remember why. I bounced right off this game when I tried it in college, and I just have no memory of why. So something about it turned me off, and I kept like waiting for that shoe to drop on this play. I was like, eventually something's gonna happen and I'm gonna be like, oh, this sucks, I don't want to play it anymore. And like that moment never quite came, right? I finished it. So you have a game that looks a lot like Link to the Past, but with that kind of like Wind Waker sensibility. So everything's a little bit more cutesy, it's a little bit more cartoony than what you got with Link to the Past. Comparable like detail level of pixel art, but with another 15 years of learning how pixel art works as a medium. So everything looks so much better, even though it's really, I think, not that much more pixel dense, like the actual screen. Right. So it's not like they had 1,000 times more colors or 10,000 times as much space to render stuff in. Like it's basically a Super Nintendo game, except it's, widescreen. It looks fantastic. It looks so good. And it sounds really good because they had again, all of that other Zelda music to draw from. And the Game Boy Zelda games, for some reason, have this lineage of like stealing that the other like console Zelda games don't have. So like when we played Link's Awakening and the Oracle Song of I don't know, one of the Seasons games, like the Game Boy ones are very big on referring to like other Game Boy properties and to other parts of the Zelda universe. They'll like reuse music for like, oh, this is the town music from that other Zelda game. This is the overworld music from that other Zelda game. And for some reason, the console games don't do that. I guess they make the new stuff and then the Game Boy ones get to like remix it.
That kind of holds up though, because like if we think about like what the budget would be for the game, it would probably be less because they were selling it for less, right? You know, so when you make the big AAA title and then, you know, you kind of say like, all right, well, we now have to make a single A title. And so they're like, all right, well, let's crib all of this so we don't have to spend any money on it. And then we can, you know, focus on better aspects of the game.
Yeah. And it does make sense from like a art creativity point of view that to have things to remix, you must do some new art, right? Like
you must first mix.
Yeah. If everything is sampling other things, eventually you just have the one song that is a sample of the one song, right? And so it's a lot of reuse and like callbacks, and right, because it's not literally the MP3 file lifted wholesale. It's like a mixed down version and it's chiptuney, but it's obviously the same piece of music, right? So you get some of that familiarity. You go into a building and it sounds like when you're in a building in Wind Waker, and on the overworld map, and it's the Link to the Past overworld map music, which immediately, like, this game would have had to roll a lot of ones to not win me over after that, because I was just like, it's the Link to the Past overworld music. This game is automatically good, I hope.
Yep. I like that music. Yeah, and it is highly recognizable. My kids recognize that music, you know?
Yeah. Some of the benefits of being on the Game Boy Advance instead of being on the N64 and then the GameCube is this era of Zelda has chatty sidekicks, right? Because chatty sidekicks, right? You got your Navi, the boat, which was also the king in Wind Waker. What was
is it yours?
Was that?
Your boat's a king, right? My boat.
Oh,
my boat that I have.
Yes, all boats are kings, right?
Yes.
Which is why they get women's names, because they're kings.
Yeah.
What was the chatty sidekick
queen.
in? What was the chatty sidekick in Majora's Mask?
Oh, it was another fairy, but it wasn't Navi.
Oh, it just like same little animation, but not Navi.
Yeah, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I think that with that one you found the fairy as you were going into the Lost Forest or whatever, because they did and this is not to crap on Majora's Mask, but like, you know, it's not Ocarina. And the thing is, it's got a bunch of things that it does really, really better than Ocarina, but the story is not as epic, right? But the whole idea was that at the end of Ocarina, Navi flies away because you are no longer a Kokiri, right? And a child.
Oh, right.
She leaves you because, you know, like she is no longer needed, and you are now growing up, which, you know, she's not supposed to, you know, so it's like, it's a symbol of Link's childhood leaving him. And then they were like, all right, we're going to make another one. So give him another fairy. Who cares? Whatever. He just needs a fairy. And we're moving on. You know, it's just like, oh, okay. So it's not Navi, because that would have completely unwound that symbolism, but you kind of stepped it back a little bit. So yes, it is just another fairy talking sidekick.
But the problem with holds, right? Which is, hey, listen, right? The thing everybody loves about that generation of Zelda games. So
always love being told what to do when I'm playing a game.
Yeah, big time. So in this, because they had learned some of those lessons, you do have a chatty sidekick, but one, there's a limit to how much noise the chatty sidekick makes, because it's Game Boy Advance game, right? It's not a full console release. And two, you can actually rely on your chatty sidekick for like somewhat useful feedback. It's not perfect. Like that was a thing that continued to evolve over time, but it is, if you played all the Zelda games in order, like in order of release, you would notice like, oh, Navi, not really very helpful, mostly annoying, right? And then there's this slow trend of improvement where the chatty sidekick is more helpful than annoying. And because this game looks like Link to the Past, your brain is just in the like, oh god, the chatty sidekick's going to be so terrible, it's going to be so annoying, but actually pretty good, which I appreciated tremendously, because when I legitimately forgot something where I was like, crap, what was I supposed to be doing? I haven't played in a couple days and I can't remember. You can press select, and because your chatty sidekick is literally your hat, right? Is like the Minish cap is like your hat. looks kind of like a bird, and he'll like poke his head up and he's like, whoa, Link, we gotta go to the Temple of Flargon, right? And then you're like, oh yes, the Flargon Temple. That's what I was doing, right? And it's just that is legitimately useful. And then sometimes when you are seeing a mechanic for the first time that is not super visually clear, he will occasionally pop up and just be like, whoa, commentary about this mechanic, but then he doesn't do it again, right? So if you continue to screw up like that, at that point it's on you, but at least the game is like, we know you know, because he literally said out loud like, whoa, the floor in here is made of ice. And it's like, okay, this is the first time in the game that there's ever been ice on the floor, and then he never says it again.
Right. Although I imagine that from the hat's point of view, with because the explaining new mechanics, that makes sense, but reminding you of what you're up to, right, is kind of weird from the hat's point of view, because Link's just kind of walking around and then just kind of, because you then turn off the game and then turn it back on 3 days later. So Link just kind of goes like run, wait. What am I doing? And the hat's like, should you see a doctor? Are you okay? Like we're supposed to be going to the,
hey buddy,
we're going to the Flargon Temple, right? The Flargon Temple. Your kids call you turn the thing off, you turn it back on, get 2 more feet, and it's like, where am I going? Oh no, you're the hero of time. Oh no, that's not good. This isn't looking good.
It's like in the Stanley Parable when you go into the room with the fast forward button, and it turns out that like time moves forward from your point of view, but it is proceeding at a normal pace in reality. And so the narrator is experiencing all of that time, but you aren't. And so he goes insane because he's just alone with you staring blankly into the void. Spoilers for the Stanley Parable, I guess, but there's a lot of other good reasons to play it.
Yeah, but no, it's nice that so I wonder though, when you're talking about the trajectory of chatty sidekicks, like it sounds like that somebody was like, they were like learning, and then they decided to just spike the ball with Fee, you know?
Yeah, the one everybody loves. And it's funny you mention her because her, yes?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Them. It's funny you mention them because I was looking at the list of all Zelda games because I was like, I think I've passed the halfway point now. Like there were a lot of Zelda games and a lot of them were on portable consoles, but I think now I've actually played more than half of them. Are there any I know I'm specifically never going to play? Skyward Sword. There's one I am intentionally going to skip because I have never heard a fond word spoken about it.
Nope. No, I've heard some people who were like, yeah, it's good, or, like if you really want to like complete the Zelda franchise, then you got to play this one. But I don't think I've ever spoken to somebody where you said, what's your favorite Legend of Zelda game? And they came out with swinging with Skyward Sword, you know?
And if that person is listening right now, please write in and explain why.
Yeah.
Tell me all the Zelda games you've played and tell me why Skyward Sword is your favorite. Because if they've only played Zelda 2 and Skyward Sword and they say Skyward Sword is their favorite, then I'll say, sure, yes, okay. That like, I can follow that logic.
They've only played Zelda 2, E.T., which they think is a Zelda game, and Skyward Sword.
Yeah. Then I will have follow-up questions, but it won't be criticizing Skyward Sword. For this Zelda game, one of the drawbacks of it is, like all of the other Game Boy Zelda games, it's 2-button, which means you're constantly like switching out the crap you have equipped, right?
Yeah.
So the Game Boy Advance, despite it being a Super Nintendo, only had 2 face buttons and then had 2 shoulder buttons. So it is a Game Boy with 2 extra buttons instead of a Nintendo with 4 extra buttons, which is not a deal breaker. It did take me probably a couple hours to stop complaining about like, I hate this, right? And it's weird if you play like Super Mario World was also ported to the Game Boy Advance. And if you are used to like doing the spin jump with a face button and now you have to use a shoulder button, like that's weird because your muscle memory is being challenged, even though the game is ostensibly the same, but it's fine. Like all the Game Boy Zeldas have this situation. You've got tons of items, but you only have 2 places to put them. And so the shoulder buttons are mapped to certain permanent actions, so you can't map things to them. So you only have your face buttons to play with. It's not that big of a deal, but it is like a thing you have to deal with. What I do appreciate about this is one of the buttons the shoulder buttons that's permanently mapped is mapped to rolling. So you can do like a little roll dodge thing, but it also is the fastest way to get around because you can do that from the jump.
Yeah.
Like from the start of the game, you can roll. So you just yep, all over town. And it's the music and sound is balanced in a way that actually does not become super annoying. So you can just
nice.
For 12 hours of Zelda gameplay, you just roll all over creation. In fact, I got the Pegasus boots and I only used them for like their intended dungeon use, because why would I permanently map a button to that when I can just roll around? I already have a move faster button that is permanently there.
It's interesting because I think with stuff like that it's so easy for you to just be like, oh, and I gave them this ability, which is useful in this situation, right? Like, oh, for example, in Ocarina, it's like, yeah, you can use a dodge roll to dodge out of the way. It's like, is dodge rolling 1/10 of a second faster than walking? So people are going to roll all over high roll, right? And it's like, well, why would they do that? Because players will maximize the fun out of your game, So
yep.
I can't imagine the monotony of the task of saying like, okay, we now need to take all of the different ways the players can move, time all of them, and make sure that if we don't want them rolling everywhere, that the roll is as bad or worse than this other thing. But yeah, that's
and it's at least not harmful, right? Like rolling, you have to deal with the sound effect, but that's basically the only downside of rolling everywhere. And there are little tiny touches, like if you've played Link to the Past a bunch of times, like you and I both have, there are little things that stand out in this game where you're just like, they were paying attention. They were paying attention, right? So for example, when you are using the Pegasus boots in Link to the Past, what happens, right? You press the button to use the Pegasus boots, and what happens?
You and then run
in a perfectly straight line.
Yes.
In Minish Cap, if you hold the D-pad, you will actually list a little bit to the side. So
nice.
If you start running and then you realize I'm going to hit that rock by like 2 pixels, you can actually kind of steer a little bit to the side, right? Which
nice.
I didn't use a ton, but every time I avoided like colliding with a villager or colliding with a rock by like half of a pixel, I was like, thank you for just letting me like and kind of lean a tiny bit to the side. They also made it so that going up and down stairs are treated like normal floor tiles. They're not a fixed animation, right? Because in Link to the Past, when you hit the stairs, you do the little like pop, 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 pop. Yeah, exactly. And you go down and you go up. And I don't mean changing floors. I mean changing like Z-axis, right? The fake Z-axis. So these are now just treated like regular floor tiles, which means you can do things like stop in the middle and swing your sword. You don't weirdly slow down or weirdly accelerate. Like you just move at a constant rate. You can dash up and down stairs.
Yeah, you can dash across them. Because that was always frustrating when you go like, and then like run up the stairs and then and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, right. And just do those change the game dramatically? No, but like they show they were paying attention to like, this doesn't help or hurt that much, but it's just a little bit nicer, right? It's just the window is just a little bit cleaner. There's just one less, thumbprint on the middle of the glass. It's just a little nice thing. Something they also considered is in Ocarina of Time, when you want to change worlds, right? Because every Zelda game seems to have like the 2 world concept. So in Ocarina, what do you have to do to change worlds?
In Ocarina, you have to go into your menu, select the ocarina, hit yes, press the button, play the song you want to play, press yes, warp to the place you want to go get the Master Swords, press yes, pull it out of the Master Sword plot, watch the animation, go back out to where you want to go, equip the ocarina again, play the song you want to play, and then go near to where you want to be, and then go to where you want to be.
Yeah, right. A lot of steps, and they're long and they're all unskippable, right?
Yes.
Especially because a lot of them are like move from place to place, right? There's no way to shortcut that. That wouldn't be like weird. So in Minish Cap, you are technically in both worlds all the time because you get bigger and smaller, right? So the world doesn't change, you change, and then that changes what you have access to. And so scattered all over the world are these like different things you can interact with. Sometimes it's a tree stump. Sometimes it's like the bottom of like a broken clay pot, and you go on it and then it makes you big or small, right? You can use all of them, do both directions. And so then you do the thing you need to do, you get big, you do the thing you need to do, you get small, you do the thing you need to do, whatever. But for some reason, when you're going from small to big, it's like bop, done, right? Like super fast. When you're going from big to small, there's this whole animation. Your hat stands up and the bird sings a little bird song. and then you shrink down and it's like, whoa, all mode 7 whooshy whooshy. And then you like, if it's a tree trunk, you like fall through a hole in the tree trunk and you bounce off like some leaves and roots. And then you walk outside the tree trunk and goddamn, it takes forever unless you press A and then it skips the whole thing.
Oh, nice.
Right? Like the first time I saw that, I literally put the Game Boy down, turned to my notes and was like, oh my God, is that animation going to play every single time? And the answer is yes, it does play every time. And they don't actually communicate to you. But what would you do if you were watching this animation and you were frustrated? You'd mash the buttons.
Start mashing buttons. Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
And it skips it. And I was just like, oh, this is fine. This is completely fine. Like it never makes you watch that animation again. It's completely fine. So like, again, a sophisticated games literacy thing that in Ocarina is all 3D whooshy whooshy. They wanted you to see him pulling the sword out and the camera panning around him and doing that whole thing. I get it. But if you're lost and you keep going back and forth between old Link and young Link, like that's a lot of watching that whooshy whooshy animation.
Well, you know what it is? It's like, if you go to a really, really nice restaurant and they're like, hey, before we serve you dinner, we're going to give you the floor show. And you get to watch this amazing floor show and there's a bunch of lights and it's beautifully executed. And you're like, all right, like that's pretty nice, right? But like, if this is the 17th time you've gone and you just need to grab a quick meal before you go to your next thing, you're like, come on. No, I don't care about any of this. I'm here for the food. Like when you're there for the mechanic, it's very different than when you're there for the experience and the 3D whooshy whooshy.
Yeah. And it's nice to have a choice, right? Because you could just watch the little animation every time. And sometimes I did, like I would go on the thing and then like reach over to my water glass or something. And then the little cool animation plays because it is a cool little animation. But if you have to change literally dozens, maybe hundreds of times, if you get lost over the course of the game, like that's a lot of whooshy whooshy animations. Like you need to be able to skip that.
Whooshy.
And you can. There are two specific things I want to shout out here because by and large, it is a really well-made 2D Zelda game, right? And I could wax philosophical about like why, and that's, I'm happy to do that, but like there's two specific things that I want to make sure I address. One of the things that's unique to this game is this thing called kin stones, like kin is in like family. And you get these halves of stones, like somebody took a circular tablet and like broke it in half. And then you can walk up to most people in the world, right? People, but also like animals, cats, dogs, cows. And they get like a little bubble over their head. And that little bubble means there's some MacGuffin way they explain it in universe, but it's like they are thinking about, like their mind is fixated on something. And if you have the matching half of the kinstone, then it brings good luck, right? And sometimes when you match kinstones with people, it means that like a treasure chest appears somewhere in the world and there's like 50 rupees in it. Sometimes you match kinstones with people and it makes the dungeon possible to finish, right? So it runs the gamut of like a little tiny extra all the way up to this is required to finish the game. And the kinstones that are required to finish the game are like unmissable. They're like right in your face, right? And then you just have to find the right person to like match it with. And then all the extra ones are all the extra ones, right? But they do two things with it that I really like. One, you can double back on this at pretty much any point. I played more than half the game without really engaging with this mechanic. And then I realized what was at stake. And I was like, whoa, bottles and heart pieces and like money. Like, oh my God, I care about this, right? Like there's all these like cool mechanical things that are involved, plus like the joy of exploration. So you can go back at any point and find someone and be like, hey, let's fuse kinstones. And so because I waited so long, I had this giant satchel full of kinstone halves. So I'm just like merging left and right. And then this is where the other thing that they did really well that stood out to me was when you fuse kinstones with someone and it makes a change in the world, they mark it on your map.
That's
so
nice.
I fused kinstones with like 30 villagers and I was like, I'm never going to be able to remember where all this stuff is, but it's like, oh, it's marked on the map. And they show you at like fusion time, like this is where this change just happened. Right. And they even mark the kind of change. Like, is it a doorway that opened? Is it a blockade that was removed? Is it a treasure chest that's there now? Like it's actually very, very thoughtful because otherwise I would be like, I would have to look at every tile on every part of the map and that would be boorish. I'm not going to do that. So at first it seemed like, oh, this is kind of a silly mechanic. I don't care about this. And then once I realized it was one, mechanically advantageous, and two, executed in a way that didn't make it a goddamn chore. I was like, oh no, this is good. This is good, actually. I like this a lot. The other thing they do is, 2D Zelda games in particular, but Zelda games in general are like, they're all about the dungeons, right? Like, that's what you're there for. You're there to go into the dungeon, find a cool dungeon tool, or maybe you bring a cool dungeon item in with you that lets you solve specific dungeony puzzles, and you beat the bad guy, and you feel smart and you're powerful, and then you get a MacGuffin, and then you collect 4 MacGuffins, and then you go punch a guy in the face using your super MacGuffin sword, right? Like, that's the general arc of a Zelda game.
Yeah, that's the formula. Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for the main release titles where you collect like 3 MacGuffins, and then you realize that you really needed to collect 7 MacGuffins the whole time. And then you collect the 7, and then you go beat the big bad.
Which this one actually doesn't do. There's only 4 MacGuffins, but it makes getting to each MacGuffin take a little bit longer. So instead of there being more easy access MacGuffins, there are fewer harder access MacGuffins. So it's actually closer to like Breath of the Wild in that way, where there's only the 4 like real dungeons, and then there's a lot of stuff mixed in throughout the world.
I feel like most of the Game Boy titles did that. Like, I feel like most of the main titles I can think of, right, did the, 8+ MacGuffins, but the smaller ones did like 4 MacGuffins, but it was a little bit more streamlined,
Yeah, I can't remember Oracle of Ages as well. I think that one had fewer MacGuffins. Link's Awakening had like 7 MacGuffins, but the first couple are like this is how to play the game MacGuffins, so they kind of get handed to you. And so really the challenging MacGuffins, there's only like 4 or 5. So I think you might be right. And it seems like now that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are out, like that is actually what they prefer, right?
Right.
Fewer MacGuffins, that there's like more interesting things to do on the way to the MacGuffin instead of a bunch of like drag races. It's more like Formula 1 racing, right? Instead of driving really fast in a straight line a bunch of times, like let's have an interesting meandering journey to get to like a handful of places, which I personally agree with.
Well, and I think that for the newer ones, that they kind of were like, hey, what we're going to do is, as opposed to, so like in like Ocarina, they said, hey, we're going to take a whole bunch of mini puzzles, put them into a dungeon, and then they will all link together into a large puzzle, right? And so what they did in like the newer ones is they said, hey, mini puzzles everywhere, and then 4 bigger, complex, but still kind of single puzzles, It's just like this puzzle takes an hour to solve, whereas these other mini puzzles take like 10 minutes, It's kind of where I feel that they went with it.
And the concept of like, what is a dungeon and what's not, right? Is because when people talk about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you often hear some kind of like, it makes you feel like Batman. Like the thing that everyone says about Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild is like, what if the whole world was like one super dungeon, right? Where like everything, there's puzzles to solve everywhere and there's things to interact with everywhere. And it is true that that's what they did. And I would even go so far as to say is like they did it successfully, but boiling it down that way does feel like it doesn't quite explain the complexity of making that very easy to screw up thing work, right? Because like a contained dungeon and Link to the Past is like everything you need to be successful is in this building, right? So if you can't be successful, it's on you, right? All the keys to open all the doors are here. Because if you remember back, the original Zelda, it didn't work that way. You could buy keys and walk into a dungeon with them. Right?
Yeah, you could just grind and then break the game.
Yeah, and all the future Zelda games, like those keys are for that dungeon only, right? The boss key only works for this boss door. The small keys only work for these small doors. The special item that you need in this dungeon, you either get in this dungeon or you get on the way to this dungeon. You can't have gotten in here and not have it, right? That was part of what made Link Between Worlds interesting, is because you absolutely could wander in and not have the right thing, and you needed to kind of figure it out. But what they did in Minish Cap, that I feel a little silly admitting this, but like when it occurred to me what was happening, like I kind of got giddy, which is there's Hyrule Town, right? Because the overall map is like Game Boy size, right? It's a little bit smaller than like Link to the Past or any of the main console releases, but it's still a pretty robust size map. And there's the big and small things, so you get extra stuff. But the town of Hyrule is a dungeon. There's puzzles to solve in the town. And there's monsters in certain parts of the town. Like, I mean, it's just bats and crap, but like they're like all of the things that make a dungeon block puzzles, pushing stuff. I can't get here without a certain item. There's enemies I have to fight. There's a thing I have to get to unlock this other thing. Like all of the things that make a dungeon are true for the town. The only difference between the town and any other part of the map is you have to weave back and forth through there over time. So at the beginning of the game, you can interact with some parts of the dungeon that is the town, but you don't have the tools to do everything, right? So then you have to like go out into the world and explore. And then when you come back, like now you can unlock this door, you have a key that solves this puzzle or whatever. And I just really enjoyed that. I really liked that there was a mechanical and narrative reason that when I came back to town, I'm different, right? Mm-hmm. The town is the same, but I can now appreciate and interact with different parts of it than I could before. It's not this like safe home base, right? It's in Link to the Past, there's like the kid that you catch him, but you can't do that until you have the Pegasus boots, right? There's it's not the ladder, maybe it's the lantern. There's some part where you like can't get into the basement under the lady's house.
You need a hammer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because you have to like pound the pegs down, right?
Bums me out that I know that off the top of my head, but yes, you need.
No, this,
you need
this is important knowledge for you to carry around with you.
Yeah, there's an area where like you go upstairs, and then in order to get to where you need to drop down into the thing, you've got to hit the hammer to like lower it, and then you can drop down. Yep.
Yeah. So it's that concept, but like every damn where, like almost every building or every like little section of town is. You need to use some game mechanic to get to this building, to get through this building, to get underneath this building, to talk to the people inside the building, or to interact with the animals and fuse kinstones with them inside the building. Like there's just that same kind of like, oh, well, you can't get this heart piece until you have the hammer to knock the. It's that, but like advance, right? It's so much more.
I mean, if you think about it too, Kakariko Village also had enemies in the form of the Sukos.
Yeah. Yes.
You know.
Yes. It's
you
the same thing, but supercharged, right? Like you can see they did like one or two versions of that gimmick, and then here they were like, what if that was just the whole thing? What if the town? And it's not like you could really easily die. Like yes, if you went underground to where the bats are and you just stood there and let them wail on you, eventually you would die inside of town, which normally you don't think of being able to do. Or if you keep like throwing yourself into the river, eventually you would lose enough hearts that you died. But generally the town is safe, but it's like, it still has all the interaction and like evolution of a dungeon that they did in some of the earlier games. But they were like, what if we just leaned all the way into this? It's just, I love it. It's so good. And once it occurred to me, I was like, the village is a dungeon. Like that was cool. Like that made me, look at the town and all of its people with fresh eyes.
Nice. No, it's good. I like it. So in your imaginings, does it hold up?
Yeah, I don't know what the hell made me bounce off this game the first time, honestly. I was in graduate school, so maybe I just was like, I don't have time for a new 2D Zelda. I'm going to play Link to the Past. But I think I slept on this game, man. Like, if you like Link to the Past, I would say this is 100% worth playing. With one, no nostalgia goggles required, but let me give you this piece of advice. Write stuff down. Like, take notes. Like, I think Zelda games in general, you should probably just take notes. But there are so many little things from the kinstones and like, oh, I need to go back here after I have some way to interact with this kind of problem. And the map doesn't give you any of the modern tools of like put a marker or a stamp here, right? So it's just the world is dense and interesting and worth interacting with, and it will be more enjoyable if you can flip open your little notebook and see what you wrote with your crayons rather than, oh, I got a new ability. I now need to revisit every spot on the map to try to see what I can do with it, right? Like try to think forward a little bit like, oh, I can't interact with this, but what will I be able to do? And that I think will make it a little less imposing when you realize you're at the end of the game and you haven't interacted with like half of the stuff because you've been interacting with it all along, right? When you get to the end, you should probably have basically 100%ed it. So no nostalgia goggles required. I'm glad I got to play it now. I will forever be haunted trying to remember by why I didn't play it the first time. But you also played a ton of games. I played one game. You played like 50 games. What did you play? Why should I care?
Yeah, so I played a whole bunch of games, and the way I was able to play a whole bunch of them was that I bounced off of quite a few of them, speaking of bouncing off of games, right? And it is. I will say that it is great that we live in a period of time where we are awash on all sides with games, but it does mean that you can be more of like the Roman emperor eating grapes with games, where you're like, this game has displeased me, So
into the fire.
Pretty much, right? Especially when you're like, oh yeah, I'm 5 minutes into a game, it does a thing I don't like, and I'm like, all right, well, delete that one off the PlayStation, moving on to the next. So I played Stranded, which I was like, oh, this seems like it might be cool. And so the idea was that a ship crash landed on an alien planet, and you got to get your peoples to help rebuild a mini society, and there's trials and tribulations along the way, right? And so I was like, okay, let's do this thing.
A RimWorld or a Dwarf Fortress like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, it is. And so I am finding out that I don't think I like those types of games. Which is weird because I love Civilization, right? I love Civilization, But here's one of the keys is that Civilization is turn-based. These are real time, but you can pause the game whenever you want, right? So but that matters because I'll be like, okay,
system.
Kinda, yeah. I'll be like, okay, you go chop a tree, you go, like, you got 3 people, go do task A, B, and C. And I'll send them off to go do it, and I'll be like, okay. So, and I'm just letting time flow, and I'll be like, okay, now you're done, so go do thing D. And, oh no, I forgot about you. And now there's like 5 hours of in-universe time that have been wasted. Am I now inexorably behind the curve? Like that stress level stresses me out. So I feel like I have to be 100% efficient with every single resource that I have. And that's stressful and not fun. Also, and I am sure I was screwing this up, but again, Roman Emperor, right? Is that it was like, okay, select your ship. And I'm like, okay. And I tried to rotate the camera down so I could like select the ship. It's like, no, you can't rotate the camera that way. That's weird, but okay. So I was like, all right, well then I'll pull away from it, or like I'll pull the camera down because like the reticle was above the thing. And it's like, no, you can't do that either. I was like, how am I supposed to select this thing? So I like spun around it and pulled back and did like 2 or 3 different things that way I could select this thing. And I was like, no, we're done here, because the mixture of if it's this hard to select something and I'm stressed out that I'm losing time every second that I don't have somebody doing something, I'm like, this is not going to be fun. This is going to stress me out, and I don't want to play it. So
that sounds like a triple click the player to like open their character sheet, right? Like I'm sure whatever the correct interaction button is made perfect sense to the person who programmed it, but for whatever reason it was not obvious to you, and it was so non-obvious that it's just like, okay, the game's broken, go to hell.
Yep, game's broken, we're done here. And again, given the I think it's like a AAA game and studio and time and history, I'm sure it's not fun. Like back in the day, the game could just be fundamentally broken, right? I'm sure it's not that. I'm sure it's me, but I didn't need to figure it out or do that introspection because I moved on to the next thing, which was Ghost Runner 2. Which, ostensibly, since it's the second one, I assume the first one did at least halfway decent. I was like, this game seems, one, it's very Twitch reflexy, right? So the idea is that I think you have 1 hit point, right? So like, the idea is that, it's like, okay, there's a bad guy in, like right in front of you, a bad guy up and a little bit to the left, and a bad guy up a little bit to the right. The idea is that there's a certain it's Ninja Gaiden, right? There's a certain series of button presses that you need to do in order to kill all of those things. And it's a rhythm game. You need to like, jump from point A, jump to point A, press these buttons, hit it in the right order. You feel like a ninja, right? But it's not like there's like maybe 3 ways to do it. And if you start to screw it up, it goes off the rails really quickly. So I was like, but I'll give this a shot. And then I died 2 or 3 times, and it kicked me back. To be fair, the cycle time was relatively quick. It didn't kick me back too far. But a lot of the game is centered around platforming, and it's a first-person shooter. So
that's risky.
It's real risky, right?
Real
because about the 2nd or 3rd time, and like there was one part where so you can like run and then run and like you wall run kind of a thing.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah. So it's like, you need to cross this gap.
Yeah, so you like run and you jump, and as long as you press yourself up against the wall, you start wall running. And then you can jump off the wall. But it was like, now jump off the wall onto this platform. I was like, how would I ever do that? It's out of my field of vision through 90% of this jump. And again, there's probably people with the skill set to do this. But about the 3rd or 4th time, I did one where I screwed up the jump 3 or 4 times. Then I finally got the jump, hit the ground, and a guy shot me that I just didn't see him, And I was like, okay. So then killed that guy, and then there was another person that I hit, instead of hitting block, I hit attack. So he took out my 1 hit point, and I died, and I had to do it again. I was like, yep, you know what? This is not my game. I don't find joy in this level of mastering a series of consecutive button presses. I don't find this relaxing. We're done here. So bounced right off of that, right?
How long would you say that loop was? Was that 20 minutes? Was that 5 hours?
Oh, like 10, 15 minutes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So, because that's the thing is that and that's why I was saying, did I give the game an honest shake? Probably not. But what was interesting about both of these, and well, all 4 of these, right, is that I was able to assess, I'm like, some of these things I think are core to the experience, and it's not what I'm looking for. And there are so many games that I think I can find one that behaves similarly and does the things that I want, right? So, yeah. So Stranded, 15 minutes. Ghost Runner, 15 minutes. To give you a point of view, all 3 of these I bounced off of in an evening. So this wasn't like...
Well, I mean, Ghost Runner is a relatively super recent game, actually. So it probably took longer to download and install.
Yeah. And since it was free, I didn't feel like, all right, well, let me see if I can get my money's worth or anything like that. I was like,
no. The whole point of you paying for the PlayStation subscription is that you could just be like, interesting. No.
Yep. No, not for me. So then I played Deliver Us Mars. And this one, it seemed like so it's a narrative heavy game, and they kind of started it off similar to The Last of Us in that you start off as like a young helpless child as you're kind of like getting a handle on the controls and also like getting a bunch of narrative poured into you. And I'm like, okay, I can deal with all of this, and big event set pieces happen and all this crazy stuff. I'm like, cool. This is fine. And so then it's like, okay, now you can kind of start to play the game. So I don't know exactly where I was, but it's like, hey, you're now a young adult, right? And they're like, hey, there's this thing blocking our sensors. Go fix it, right? Go do this mundane task to further understand the game. So, I walk to where I need to go, and there was nothing telling me exactly where I needed to go, so I kind of needed to figure it out. And I spent about 30 seconds trying to jump up onto a ladder that I could not jump onto, and I was like, okay, I guess they don't want me to go that way. I did figure out the way to go. And then I found there's this piece of debris on this sensor, and there's 3 little lines that, of like weak points, and you have a little laser gun that you can use to cut, right? So like a laser cutter. So it's like, okay, you want me to go to this thing and use the laser cutter, trace the line, and it will cut the thing in these 3 places. I was like, that to me is not the most engaging gameplay, because it's like, go to a place and now do exactly what we tell you. There is no, like put the key in the hole. But I was like, maybe it'll get more interesting, whatever. And then it did a thing where I was like, if the game ever does this again, I'm going to break my PS5. And I'm not willing to take that risk, which is, so, there's 3 lines that you need to cut through to cut this thing into 4 pieces. So I cut the first line, cut the second line, cut the third line. And it was like, no, we still don't have access to the sensor. Nothing triggers, just nothing triggered, right? And so I'm like, okay, that's weird. So I kind of look at it. I look at my mission log. I'm like, did I screw something up? What's going on? And then I was like, well, this last animation didn't play out the way I think it was supposed to. So I traced it again, and it turns out I didn't hit all of the little invisible dots I needed to hit when I traced it the first time. And so when I traced it the second time, it actually broke apart. And the narrative continued. And I'm like, the only reason why I was able to figure this out is because this was the only variable in the puzzle. If this game is puzzle-based, which I'm guessing that it is, and there are times when this will be one of 5 pieces of the puzzle, and it does this, and I spend like half an hour of my life trying to troubleshoot the rest of this puzzle, and it's because the game said like, nah, you didn't quite cut this thing in half. I'm going to murder everybody. So, nope, we're done, right? It will bring me infinite amounts of negative joy if that happens. So we're done with Deliver Us Mars. Again, might be a cool game. Who knows? So
sorry to everybody who worked on it. You're terrible.
Yeah. And then I played Capes, and Capes was actually a genuine disappointment because I did buy it. It was like $20 or something like that. And I also bounced right off of this one because that sunk cost money. The money's gone, and my joy can still be found.
Is Capes like one of those like what if superheroes but realistic?
It's yes. Yeah, it has that kind of like superheroes in a I think the plot, if I remember correctly, is superheroes used to be awesome superheroes, but then corporations, and now everything's terrible, right? Like the corporations were like, oh, soups shouldn't be legal because of liability reasons, and so now soups are illegal, and so on and so forth.
So it's the plot of The Incredibles.
Yeah. We're doing The Incredibles, but like super noir, like intense, right? So that's fine. And so the plot was good. The mechanics, I think, were good. It was very like XCOM, where it's like you've got a person, this is where they can go on the board. And I was like, oh, this might feel a little bit like Baldur's Gate. That's pretty cool. And the reason why I bounced off of it, I'm not proud of, but it is good to know this about myself, which is that the hit sparks and sound effects were trash, man. And so when you would go up to somebody and you'd use your special ability, and like you're like the ninja knife person, and you'd hit them in the back with your knives, right? Is it would just kind of show your knives like passing through them, almost like like you're touching them, and the person would go like, ugh, and you'd see the hit points deducted. So like you could see the math playing out, but I'm like, I feel like I just hit somebody with a wet noodle, and it's like, oh no, if you hit me with that wet noodle 5 more times, I'm not going to be able to punch you back. And I'm like, this is, in my opinion, even worse than D&D, because in D&D, I know it's not going to give me anything, so I use my imagination, and we describe it to each other. It's like, all right, you hit and you deal 20 damage. What does that look like? It's like, well, I took out my crossbow and I shoot him in the shoulder, and as he's pulling it out, like this whole big narrative thing, right? But this literally felt like, you dealt 20 damage. What do you wish to do next? I wish to use my block. So instead of hitting you for 10 damage, he only hits you for 5. Neat. Now what? And it was it felt like the tactics equivalent of like getting a prostate exam, where it's just like a thing that just kind of needs to happen. And it just felt very like mechanical, where it's like doing A, now B, now C, and now it's done, and you did it. Hooray. And I'm like, I feel nothing. I feel nothing. I don't feel happy or sad or excited. This was just like a box that I checked.
So I think this is an interesting topic to me, because I'm imagining something that I would describe as like, we did what we could with the budget we had mobile game, right? And so like a lot of mobile games, even in their ads where the animations look better than the real game does, is like, oh, it's got real strategy, action, and whatever. But, there's like, they're working for slave wages. The team is way undersized. The administrators are like whipping them to work a million times faster than any reasonable person should. And so one of the places you can cut a lot of corners is animation, because it's hard and it takes a long time, right? Like doing really good animation is like a whole job. So if you have a small screen and you're like, okay, the character design, it looks good. Like they look like a cool action superhero or a knight in shining armor or whatever. And then they get hit and they have like one generic, I got hit animation. So if they get stabbed with a sword or chopped with an axe or hit with a fireball or punched in the balls, like everything still has the same like blah animation. That to me is something I associate with like sad modern mobile games, right? But I think also that was true of a lot of, because I have some screenshots up from this game. Like this is also true of a lot of like early D&D games, like your Icewind Dales and your early Baldur's Gates and stuff, because that was just the best they could do. So like we were a lot more forgiving because they were already doing like an unconscionable amount of work, and they were inventing whole new systems and building all the engines and everything from the ground up. And like, it was expensive and it was hard. And so your brain was a little bit more forgiving because the graphics were a little bit blurrier and smaller. And you were like, it was still low enough fidelity that you were kind of projecting your imagination onto it a little bit. But like, this game looks great in stills, right? But then like I can see these little preview animations, and they're exactly like an ultra HD version of Baldur's Gate 1 or of Icewind Dale, where all the animations are canned. And so you have this like super HD 4K, like super smooth textures. And then it's just, like when they get hit, no matter what they got hit by. And I'm sure, I'm exaggerating a little bit for effect. And also like I'm working from trailer screens, but like, I'm with you. That's unacceptable. Like, then just don't do it. Like, don't pretend you have these super high fidelity graphics if that's not what you're going to deliver, because it creates it creates the uncanny valley, right? It creates
an
crevice,
expectation.
for you to fall into.
Yeah, no, dude, 100%. Thank you. Because I felt pretty shallow for this, but when I was playing Baldur's Gate, one of the things I really love about it, and the reason why I've poured more than 200 hours of my life into it, is not only is it great tactics, great story, great everything, but like when you say, Lae'zel, I want you to use your trip maneuver or whatever, she like grabs her sword and like jumps into the air with like her great sword, right? And you hear this shh, and then bam, and she like hits down, and if you hit, then like all of a sudden they're just like thrown onto the floor, and you're like, yeah. Or like as a monk, when you use your flurry of blows, it sounds like almost like lightning or thunder crackling as you're like punching them and kicking them, and it really feels awesome when it goes off, right? And so yeah, like that's what you want to feel like, right? So and then also it's like, oh yeah, I did this amazing thing, and I dealt 20 damage, heck yeah, as opposed to yes, minus 20, and then you move on. So I was like, oh, this is I feel nothing, so yeah.
There's a term that gets thrown around a lot from like game designer YouTubers, and I think it is actually the industry term, but I think the thing we're talking about is juice. Right? Like it's like, okay, the thing happened visually. Like I see that my character punched that character, and I see that there's confirmation that they got hit because they flashed white or whatever, and their health bar went down or the number went to a lower number. So like I know that the thing happened, but it doesn't feel like it happened, right? Like
there's no juice.
There's no juice. Like I'm positive that it happened, but it doesn't feel good, right? If a
right.
regular hit and a critical hit and a gunshot and a sword stab and a magic spell, like if they all have the exact same like that just doesn't, there's no juice. It doesn't feel good. And like to harken back to Minish Cap for a minute, holy crap, did they learn a lot about pixel art in the intervening decade and a half, because there's so much little cutesy animations that they didn't need to be there, right? But it makes the game feel better, right? When Link wakes up out of bed, because it seems like a lot of Zeldas start with Link in bed, right? Like he like rubs his eyes, and after you get the Minish Cap, because it's like a little person, instead of him being on your head, he's like next to you in the bed, and there's this little like, hey, wake up, we gotta go, like shaking animation. It's like you could go the entire game and literally never see that animation, because when you wake up in bed at the start of the game, you don't have the Minish Cap, and there's never a time where you are required to use a bed again after you get the Minish Cap. But they still bothered to animate this little like, hey, wake up animation, which makes it feel really good.
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly. And it feels good. Like it feels like you're playing a game, as opposed to just, working with spreadsheets. So yeah, unfortunately I might circle back to it, but I've got a bunch of other games that I have played or am playing that scratch that same itch, like Baldur's Gate, where it's like, oh, if I'm looking for something tactical, why would I play this? I'll just play Baldur's Gate because it's, more fun. Two other games I played was Cat Quest and Cat Quest 2.
These ones I'm excited to hear what you think about, because I have these in my library because I got them for free ages ago, and I've seen positive things said about them, but I have spent 0 seconds actually playing them.
They good.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, episode over. No, so the interesting thing is that, one, on a economic standpoint, so I got both Cat Quest and Cat Quest 2 free from the PlayStation Store, because of the subscription. You know why? Cat Quest 3 is coming out.
Ah, there it is. Yeah.
And
fresh, hot new game. Get in there and play some Cat Quest.
Exactly, right? And I'm going to buy it now because I really enjoy. I probably wouldn't have if they're like, Cat Quest 3 is coming out. I'd be like, I don't know. I'm not going to buy 2 other games and whatever. But they're like, hey, man, just play these games for free. I'm like, oh, these games are really good. Oh, you like that, do you? It's interesting. Funny you should say that, because you see we have this Cat Quest 3 coming out that we would like you to pay for. Oh, yeah, I'll pay for that, So, so the system is working the way it is supposed to, right? It was a good marketing decision on their point. So I played Cat Quest, and God, I loved it, man. It was really, really enjoyable. They do a number of things I really like. First of all, you start off your level 1, so there's a leveling mechanic to it, right? As you beat bad guys, they drop little experience orbs and gold, and you pick that stuff up. And so the nice thing is that every monster drops the same number of orbs. The orbs are just worth more as the bigger, badder things you defeat, if that kind of makes sense, right? I like that because even when you're level 80 and wailing on a level 1 thing, it still feels good because like you're picking up 4 orbs, right? You know, and that feels great. Even though like each orb's only worth 6 experience and you would need to kill thousands of them, hordes, throngs of these things in order to level up, it just still feels like you're making some progress, right? The hit sparks and sound effects are really good. When you're hitting stuff, it feels satisfying. When you kill them, it makes this like little like fun crunchy sound that, you know, like makes you feel like you did a thing. They almost always defer to you. Like if something's about to hit you and like you hit them at the same time, your hit lands, theirs doesn't.
Tiger which always, the runner, always.
Yep, absolutely, which feels really good. And the other thing that it does that I really enjoy is that, well, 2 things. One is that is as you're exploring the area, it has a bunch of stuff. You can't get to it yet. You're either not powerful enough or you don't have the right items, equipment, what have you, very similar to like a Zelda. But when you press the button, it kind of zooms out the map for you so you can kind of see how large this world is and like how much of it there is to explore. So you're just on this one little island, and there are some people who have you doing like these kind of like little quests, but then, and there's this ice island? Like, what's that got going on? And it's an island, and I don't have a ship or any way to get to it. What could be up there, you know? And so typically as you go north, things become more powerful. But there are a bunch of different like little caves, and there are quests that will tell you to go into the caves. But there's also, you could just go into them, and the caves all tell you what level you should be in order to go into the cave, which feels awesome because so you can also use magic, dodge, and attack, right? So, and the enemies telegraph when they're going to attack. Like if they attack in a circle, it'll show a red circle and then show it slowly turn redder and redder and redder until they attack. So in theory, you could be level 1 and take on a level 99 thing and win. It's just if it hits you once, it will kill you, and you'd have to hit it like 10,000 times. But it's possible in theory. So that
it sounds like the combat is live. Like so,
yes.
there's skill to it. It's not just like I can't win because their numbers are bigger numbers.
Correct, 100%. Right. So I was finding that I could generally punch about 10 levels higher than my weight class. So like if I was level 40, it'd be tough, but I could take on like a level 50 thing, maybe even a level 55 if I was like particularly adroit. But and death is really not punished at all. It just kicks you to like the last town that you quick saved in. So, I mean, worst case, you lose like 30 seconds of running back to where you were. You keep your level, you keep all your stuff, And so, yeah, there would be times where I'd be like, I don't know, man, I'll take a swing at this cave. And you go and you get your lunch ate and you're like, all right, well, not now, apparently. And on top of that, there's a golden key that you can find later on in the game. And it opens all of the golden chests. You get one golden key, it opens all the golden chests. But as you're playing the game, you see these golden chests around, and it goes like, nah, man, you don't got the key for that. And you're like, but what's in it? I want to know. And so then you get the golden key, and you go and you open stuff, and it's like super powerful items or whatever. The other thing that it does that I think is really fascinating is that in treasure chests always house equipment, right? But so like let's say there's the sword of ages and the sword of omens, right? So if the sword of ages gives you more attack, the sword of omens gives you more defense, let's just say, right? If you go into a dungeon and you open it up and you already have both swords, if it were to give you that sword again, instead of you like selling it and getting money and having all of those mechanics, it just levels up that copy of the sword,
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like
that's interesting.
Right. So if you've got like a level 10 Sword of Ancients, level 10 Sword of Omens, and then you would get another Sword of Ancients, it would be like, now you have a level 15 Sword of Ancients, And so it just kind of like...
Is there a good like in-universe explanation for that? Or is that just the designers being like, we're not going to waste your time?
I think the latter. I don't think that they had a good in-universe. Because the whole game is kind of silly. Like it's very much so like any time that they can say, like, purr or meow or fur instead of like it's all just kind of silly. But yeah, so that's really nice. And also your class is determined by your equipment, right? So like you have your level, and then if you equip all of the magic user stuff, then your magic is more powerful, right? But there were some times where I was like, okay, I always go super high attack, low defense, because I'm like, I want us both to hit each other once and then for combat to be over, right? One way or another. But there were times where I was like, well, you know what? This attack sword is like 10% better attack, but this other sword has 10% less attack, but like 50% better health. So like I'm going to switch to that sword because it's still overall better. So it forced me into different play styles sometimes because the other weapon was so much better, than the one niche weapon I was using. And so it makes a genuine excitedness to like open the next chest because, and the amount of levels that are given to the item are proportionate to the level of the dungeon that you're going into. So a level 55 dungeon will level your sword up 10 times, whereas a level 10 dungeon would level it up 2 times. So like if you're level 40, you complete the level 55 dungeon and there's a chest back there, you're like, oh, I really hope this is for a weapon that I care about. And you get all excited and you open it up and sometimes it's not, but sometimes it is. And it's very exciting,
The box, but you didn't have to pay for it.
Exactly. And then, as you get abilities that allow you to improve your exploration, it does give you that giddy feeling of like, oh, well, now that I've got these boots, what was up on that ice island? And you go up there and you're like, a level 99 cave, we'll come back to that one,
Bye.
And so then finally, I loved Cat Quest so much, I burned through it in like, I don't know, 2 days, 3 days. I mean, I just blazed through that. So it's like time for Cat Quest 2. I think that I might like Cat Quest a little bit better. But the nice thing about Cat Quest 2 is that you have both a cat and a dog. The world is way more expansive.
There's a Poochie.
Yeah, but that means that if you're playing the cat, the dog is always following you around and it's AI controlled, so it does its thing. But 2-player couch co-op, so
nice.
And it allows you to seamlessly jump in and out. So like Teddy and I were playing it together, and he was just having a ball, And they do more to make the different items change your class, like the magic user stuff now attacks at range, but like halves your health. So, it really does kind of push you more into a class depending on what items you've got. And they do more so say like, hey, you might want to have your dog. If the cat is a melee, you want your dog to be ranged or vice versa or whatever. So there's a little bit more complexity to it. But also just really enjoyed that one. Got to run around, and the thing that was nice about Cat Quest 1 and Cat Quest 2 is by the time I went to go do the last big thing, I had done all of the side stuff and, gotten all of the levels and completed all of the quests. And you know what that meant is that when I went in to go defeat the main big bad, I curb stomped him like it was nobody's business. And that felt real good, because
you went on the journey, you got the sword, you earned the levels, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. And so when I walked up to him, he's like, behold, my ultimate dragon. I was like, what else you got? And he's like, well, but now I will attack you. It's like, yeah. But what else? And it's just like, I don't know what to do. Like, how could you have become this strong? And I'm like, because I'm a golden god. What else you got? Like that's what you want because I don't always love it when games say like, do all the side stuff and become more powerful. And then you fight the big boss and it's like, oh, that was like 10% easier. It's like, no, if I do all this stuff, if you say you can go fight the boss when you're level 60 and I'm level 95, I want to like just rip him to pieces. In Cat Quest 2, the other cool thing is that they have clear extra bosses and stuff, so like there's the main villain, but then there's also like Cat Thulu, who's just out in the middle of the ocean and is a pain in the butt to beat, but he's guarding a golden chest. And I unfortunately need to know what's in that golden chest.
Yeah, and it's the developer's fault for putting something there that you can't live without. Like
Nope.
You have to know.
It is the only thing I have ever wanted.
Yes. Although I do really, and I mean this sincerely, I like the RPG trope of there's the end boss that narratively is supposed to be the biggest threat, but then there's the extra content boss that is actually way harder.
Oh, dude, I actually just set that up in one of my D&D adventures. I'm kind of doing like a sandbox thing where like they can pick quests and I build it all out. And so they're level 3 right now. And so they had to somebody hired them to go find a thing in a person's house, but also, hey, while you're there, if you wanted to kill him, that'd be great. And so they went and they found the thing, and then they went into the basement to go kill the guy. And he's in the basement, and the person's like, I throw a javelin. I'm like, hang on, let me finish narrating. So as he's walking out, you see he turns into a great blue worm, a giant dragon, right? Because they're actually a dragon that is polymorphed, right? And I was like, and he kind of like lays down to take a nap. I'm like, you still want to throw that javelin? They were like, no. And so I said, but hey, you found another quest. And so I took the quest stat block and I dumped it into the shared folder. It's like in all of the quest stat blocks, I give like a proposed level, like a good game designer, right? So they're all doing like level 1, level 2, level 3 stuff, you know. This was a level 17 quest, you know, and it's go kill the dragon, right? And the thing is that narratively, I plan on them being wrapped by level 15, you know. So the nice thing is it's like, hey, man, you know, now for the next 6 months, it's like, should we, do you think we could go take that dragon? Let's go fight the dragon. It's like, dude, we're only level 10. It's like, but maybe though, right?
Maybe,
you know,
maybe if we're super clever, like real clever.
But
I do want to point out that you more than once, because you have the PlayStation Network subscription, you have said, "Oh, I played this game that I would casually recommend," and often for exactly the reason you enumerated. The reason the certain games are on there is because a sequel's coming out, or that studio is about to release something else, even if it's not in that same franchise, it's the same, you know, like publisher or whatever. And so they're like, hey, our other games are on sale. So the other times that this has happened, the time between recording and episode release meant that by the time people heard you say this is a good game, you should probably play it, the sale was over. That's not going to happen this time. There will be 12 beautiful hours where this game is still on sale on Good Old Games and on Steam, and I'm sure it will continue to be in the PlayStation Network, you know, free bundle of games.
Yeah.
So if you are listening to this episode the day it comes out and you want to go buy this game for 75% off,
yeah,
you can own it DRM free on Good Old Games, or you could get it on Steam for literally, the game is normally $13. It's $3.
$3, man. Yeah, no, and that really rewards our listeners who listen to us right away. And honestly, if they were to let this sale go, it'd be a real catastrophe.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained at the end of it all. Gamers play what we play, not for game over, but rather for what we take away. The world is sad, but who cares? People know that that's not what you came for. Your next adventure already in sight. You're all set to go. You're excited to see what's all wrong till it's right, and the world is saved. So you're more along for the ride. You're more along for the ride. You're more along for the ride. You're more along for the
Hey, George.
I'm a chemist, yes.
Yeah, good. Yep, that's thank you.
That's how we start them, right?
That's the other one.
Oh shit, my bad.